The frost crackled under her boots, sharp as splintered bone. That one sound, always brought him back. For a breath. Then the emptiness rushed in, colder than the Icelandic wind slicing through the open stable door. Hay dust motes danced in the weak morning light, smelling faintly sweet and sour like forgotten summer. The wind whistled through gaps in the weathered wood, a lonely tune. She stood just inside, not quite entering, her gloved fingers gripping the rough doorframe. What do you do when the only thing left of someone you loved is a horse they left behind? Eileen hadn't set foot in this stable since before the glacier took Olafur. 6 months. The familiar scent of horse, leather oil, and damp stone should have been comforting. It was a physical blow. Her breath hitched, a tiny cloud forming and vanishing in the frigid air. She forced her eyes away from his old workbench, the worn saddle still hanging where he'd left it. Focus, feed, water, leave. That was the plan. Guilt gnawed at her, a constant companion sharper than the cold. Olafur's pride, his joy, left alone in the gloom. In the farthest stall, shadowed and still, stood the mare. Freya. Olafur had named her after the goddess, a bold choice for such a compact creature. But he'd seen the fire in her, he'd said. Now the fire seemed banked. Embers. Elin saw only a silhouette against the back wall, a shape carved from the gray morning light filtering through a high, dirty window. Utterly motionless. Not a flick of an ear, not a shift of weight. Just watching. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, charged with the mare's silent assessment. Elin felt pinned by that unseen gaze, judged for her long absence. The wind moaned outside, an underscore to the tension. She moved slowly, deliberately. The crunch of her boots on the frozen dirt floor echoed too loudly. She grabbed a flake of hay from the dwindling stack, its brittle strands scratching her gloves. She approached Freya's stall, stopping a good meter from the heavy wooden partition. The air felt colder near the mare, or maybe that was just Elin's own chill. She tossed the hay over the partition. It landed with a soft thud on the straw. Inside, Freya didn't move. Her head remained low, almost unnaturally still. Only her eyes tracked Elin. Large, dark pools reflecting the dim light, impossible to read. Not hostile, not welcoming. Guarded, like a fortress sealed tight against a perpetual winter. Elin remembered Olafur's laugh, booming in this space, Freya nudging his shoulder, demanding treats. The memory was a physical ache. She turned away, busying herself with the water bucket, chipping at the thin layer of ice that had formed overnight. The rhythmic chip, chip, chip filled the silence, a fragile counterpoint to the wind. When she turned back, bucket refilled, Freya hadn't touched the hay. She stood exactly as before, her dense, shaggy winter coat making her look broader, more elemental, a creature carved from the tundra itself. Elin hesitated, then slowly, cautiously, reached out a hand, palm flat, towards the partition. Not touching, just offering, an apology hanging unspoken in the frozen air. Freya's nostrils flared wide and dark, a deep, slow inhale. Her ears, tipped with thick fur, swiveled minutely forward, then back, then settled, half-cocked. Her breath plumed out, warm and visible, momentarily obscuring her gaze. She didn't retreat. She didn't advance. She simply breathed, watching. The scent of hay, leather, frost, and Elin's own nervous sweat mingled in the space between them. Elin's hand trembled slightly, the cold biting through her glove. Minutes stretched, thin and brittle. The only sounds were the wind's lament and the soft sigh of the mare's respiration. Elin lowered her hand. Pointless. What connection could she possibly forge with this silent monument to her loss? She was a ghost haunting her brother's life. She turned, intending to leave, the familiar weight of grief settling back onto her shoulders heavier than before. She took one step, then two, towards the door, the frost crunching again under her boots. Escape. Behind her, a soft, deliberate sound. Not a hoof step, a shift of weight. Straw rustled, Elin froze, mid-step. She didn't turn around, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She held her breath, listened. Silence stretched again. Had she imagined it? The wind howled, mocking her. Then a soft, warm puff of air brushed the back of her neck, just below her woolen hat, followed by the faintest, most hesitant touch against her sleeve, the rough velvet of a horse's muzzle, just for a second, then gone. Elin closed her eyes. The world narrowed to that tiny point of contact, a spark in the vast cold. She slowly turned. Freya stood right at the partition now, her head lowered, slightly, those dark eyes fixed on Elin's face. No longer distant, curious, waiting. Hay clung to the mare's whiskers. She hadn't eaten it. She'd stepped closer. Elin's throat tightened. She raised her hand again, slowly. This time she let her fingertips brush the coarse, thick hair on Freya's broad forehead, just above her eyes. The mare's skin twitched. Beneath her touch, a reflex. But she didn't pull away. She lowered her head another fraction, her warm breath fogging the air near Elin's glove. A faint scent of horse and clean snow enveloped her. It wasn't affection. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. A fragile bridge thrown across a chasm of grief and solitude. Elin found herself speaking, her voice barely a whisper, raw and unused. "He loved you, Freya." The name felt foreign on her tongue. He really did. The mare's ears flicked forward, at the sound. Not at the words, Elin knew. Horses didn't understand names like that. But maybe at the tone? Or perhaps just the vibration. Freya nudged gently against Elin's gloved hand. A quiet, insistent pressure. "Stay." Elin pulled her hand back as if burned. The unexpected contact, the simple request, was too much. The fragile connection felt suddenly dangerous. A doorway to pain she couldn't face. "I have to go," she murmured, more to herself than the horse. She turned decisively this time, walking quickly towards the stable door, the frost screaming under her boots, the wind whipping her face as she stepped back. Into the brutal morning light. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She walked across the frozen yard towards the small dark house, the silence of the tundra pressing in. Halfway there, she stopped. A sound. Distinct. Unmistakable. Not the wind, not the creak of old wood. The rhythmic, solid crunch of hooves on packed snow and ice. Steady. Deliberate. Behind her. Elin's breath caught. She forced herself to turn around. Freya stood just outside the stable door, framed by the weathered wood. The weak sun caught the silver threads in her thick, dark gray coat. She wasn't tied, she wasn't haltered. She had simply followed. Head held high now, ears pricked forward, watching Elin across the expanse of frozen ground. Not demanding, not pleading. Just there. Her dark eyes held Elin's gaze, unblinking against the wind. Why now? After all these months of silent endurance in the gloom of the stable, why step out into the biting cold, into the space Elin was trying so desperately to flee? The question hung heavy in the frigid air, more insistent than the gale. Elin stood rooted to the spot, the cold forgotten, staring at the horse who had crossed the threshold of her solitude, and now stood waiting in the light. The crunch of Freya's hooves on the frozen yard echoed long after Elin brought her back into the stable. That single act of following, untethered, unasked, became a silent question that burrowed under Elin's skin. She kept the mare closer now, not out of sudden affection but a bewildered obligation. The horse had stepped into the light. Elin felt obligated at least not to slam the door. Yet the stable remained a vault of grief. She mucked stalls mechanically, filled water buckets, tossed hay. Freya watched, always watching. Her dark eyes tracked Elin's movements with an unnerving intensity that felt less like curiosity and more like waiting. For what? Weeks bled into the deep Icelandic winter. The sun became a pale memory, replaced by the eerie glow of the aurora, and the perpetual twilight of snow-laden skies. Elin's routine hardened. Feed, water, avoid the workbench, avoid Freya's gaze. But the mare began to act. Subtle things. Elin would mutter Olafur's name under her breath while wrestling with a frozen latch, and Freya's head would snap up, ears pricked forward, a soft, questioning whicker escaping her. Not a demand, but a recognition. Once, Elin dropped Olafur's old leather glove. Before she could bend, Freya had nudged it gently with her nose, pushing it towards Elin's boot, then looked up, her breath fogging the air between them. It felt deliberate, haunting. The tension coiled tighter. Elin found herself talking to the mare, just scraps of sentences. Stubborn latch, just like him, or winds picking up again. It was easier than the crushing silence. Freya would listen, head tilted, sometimes blowing warm air onto Elin's cold hands. A fragile, wordless dialogue began, built on shared space and unspoken history. Elin felt the icy walls around her heart begin to sweat, not melt but soften at the edges. It was terrifying. Letting Freya in felt like betraying the purity of her grief for Olafur. This horse was a reminder, not a replacement. Wasn't she, one brutal afternoon? The wind screamed like a banshee, driving stinging ice pellets horizontally. Elin fought her way to the stable, shoulders hunched, every step a battle. Inside, the relative quiet was a relief, thick with the smell of horse and damp wool. Freya stood alert in her stall, sensing the storm's fury. Elin leaned against Olafur's workbench, catching her breath, her eyes inevitably drawn to the worn surface. Dust coated everything except a patch near the edge. A patch Freya often nosed when Elin was near. Driven by a compulsion she couldn't name, Elin grabbed a rag. Not to clean, but to see. She wiped away the grime, revealing the grain of the old scarred wood. And there, carved not with a knife but with the patient, clumsy strokes of something like a nail, were letters. Faint, almost worn smooth by time and touch. 2 sets of initials, O.B., and beneath them, deeper, fresher looking, as if tended. Olafur Bjarnason, Freya. A choked sound escaped Elin. Not a sob, not yet. A gasp of pure, stunned recognition. He'd marked her, claimed her, not just named her but etched her into the very fabric of his world, right next to himself. The glove, the name, the watching. Freya wasn't just Olafur's horse. She was his witness. She had seen him carve this. She remembered. She had been tending the mark, keeping it clear all this time, waiting for Elin to see it, to understand. The dam broke. Not with a roar, but with a silent, shuddering collapse. Elin's knees buckled. She slid down the leg of the workbench, landing hard on the cold dirt floor. The rag fell from her numb fingers. Then came the tears. Not the quiet, contained grief she'd perfected, but great heaving sobs that tore through her chest, raw and ugly. 6 months of frozen agony thawed in an instant, flooding out in a torrent of snot and salt. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking, the sounds of her weeping lost in the howl of the storm outside. He loved her. He left her. He left me. He loved her. He's gone. He's gone. She didn't hear the stall door, didn't hear the soft footsteps on the straw. She only felt it, a massive, warm presence settling beside her on the floor. Freya. The mare didn't nudge, didn't wicker. She simply lowered her great head, her thick neck curving, and rested her heavy jaw gently on top of Elin's shaking shoulder. Warmth radiated through Elin's jacket. The mare's breath, slow and deep, stirred the hair at Elin's temple. She smelled of hay and winter coat and an earthy, animal calm. Freya didn't move. She just stayed. A solid, breathing anchor in the tempest of Elin's shattered heart. She absorbed the tremors, the sobs, the ragged gasps for air. Minutes stretched. The storm raged. The mare held her ground, her unwavering presence a silent vow. You are not alone in this darkness. I am here. I remember him too. The ice storm passed, leaving the tundra encased in glass under a weak returning sun. Weeks turned, the days imperceptibly lengthening. The heavy silence in the stable didn't vanish, but it changed. It became a quieter space, less charged with avoidance, more filled with the simple rhythmic sounds of care. The rasp of a curry comb on thick winter fur, the soft munching of hay, the steady filling of a water bucket. Elin found herself lingering, after chores, leaning against Freya's stall door, a hand resting absently on the mare's broad neck. Freya would often turn her head, resting her chin on Elin's shoulder, just as she had that day on the floor, a quiet habit now. Crisp morning. Weeks later, Elin carried Olafur's old saddle towards Freya's stall. It wasn't a decision made with fanfare, it felt like the next quiet step. She held it up, letting the mare sniff the familiar leather. Freya blew out softly, her nostrils flaring over the worn pommel. She nudged it gently with her nose, then looked at Elin, her dark eyes calm, expectant. No resistance, just readiness. The simple acceptance was a gift Elin hadn't known she needed. She saddled her carefully, the movements still clumsy but imbued with a new tenderness. Olafur's gloves were on her hands. They rode out slowly, Freya picking her way with sure-footed confidence across the frozen landscape. The world was hushed, breathtakingly vast. Snow crunched underfoot, the only sound besides their breathing. Elin didn't guide. She simply sat, feeling the powerful movement beneath her, the connection through the saddle, the shared warmth. Freya seemed to know the way, heading not towards the village but up a familiar gentle slope overlooking the frozen river valley. Olafur's favorite view. Near the crest, Freya stopped, not at the very top, but a few meters shy, near a cluster of wind-sculpted rocks partially buried in snow. She lowered her head, sniffing intently at the base of the largest rock. Then, surprisingly, she pawed at the frozen ground, not aggressively, but with a focused persistence. Elin dismounted, puzzled. "What is it, girl?" Freya nudged the spot, again with her nose, then looked pointedly at Elin. Kneeling, Elin brushed away the loose snow Freya had disturbed. Beneath it, the ground wasn't entirely frozen. And there, tucked into a shallow depression shielded by the rock, lay a small, oilcloth-wrapped bundle. Hands trembling, Elin unwrapped it. Inside was a small, carved wooden horse, unmistakably Freya, capturing her compact strength, the set of her ears. And beneath it, a folded piece of paper, Olafur's familiar sprawling handwriting covering it. Not a letter, a list. Places to show Elin, the hot spring behind Vamor, the Eagle's Nest Cliff, safe path, the Blue Ice Cave, summer only, where the Arctic foxes den quietly, teacher Freya's favorite scratch spot behind left ear obviously. At the bottom, a single line. Remember to live it, sister. It's too beautiful not to. Elin clutched the carving and the note to her chest, the wood smooth and warm against her palm. She looked at Freya. The mare gazed back, her breath pluming in the cold air, her eyes deep and knowing. She hadn't just carried Elin up the hill. She'd carried Olafur's last urgent message, his plea, his final gift, delivered not by chance but by the steadfast heart of the creature who had loved him and now, quietly, loved his sister. The vast frozen landscape stretched before them, beautiful and harsh, filled with the echoes of loss and the fragile, enduring pulse of life. Elin took a deep, shuddering breath of the icy air. It didn't hurt as much. Not anymore. She rested her forehead against Freya's solid neck, feeling the powerful beat of the mare's heart against her skin. Sometimes, the ones who carry you home are the ones who remember the way when you've forgotten. If this story of Freya and Elin found its way into your heart, do us a kindness. Hit subscribe so you're here when the next tale arrives. Another true whisper of courage, loss, and the unexpected bonds that heal us. Leave a comment below telling us what moment moved you most. And tap that bell icon so YouTube lets you know the moment we release our next story. Because in a world that can feel so cold, these real, raw moments of connection, they're worth being here for. Thank you for watching. Until next time.